Under the soft blaze of studio lights, Craig Melvin has long mastered the calm cadence that millions of viewers wake up to each morning. But what many in their 60s understand, perhaps more intimately now than ever, is that composure is often a carefully folded coat worn over the shoulders of fatigue, doubt, and private reckoning. And in the quiet seconds after a breaking news segment ends and the cameras tilt away, Craig sometimes feels the full weight of stories that refuse to clock out with him. He has reported on hurricanes that swallowed neighborhoods, on national tragedies that bent the country into collective mourning, on moments when hope flickered stubbornly against overwhelming odds. And while viewers see the steady anchor, those who have lived long enough to carry their own archive of headlines know that absorbing the world's turbulence day after day leaves a residue, a fine dusting of sorrow that settles into the corners of the heart. And it is in those unseen interludes, after the producer's voice fades from his earpiece and the studio quiets to a low electrical hum, that Craig exhales not just air, but the accumulated strain of being a witness to history in real time. Over the years, he has learned that resilience is less about bracing for impact and more about tending to the aftermath, about allowing space for the tremor in his hands to steady, about acknowledging that even seasoned professionals can be shaken. And perhaps it is this truth that resonates most deeply with those who have navigated their own decades of high-pressure moments, raising children through uncertain economies, caring for aging parents while balancing careers, standing firm during cultural shifts that redefined the very fabric of daily life. Because resilience at 65 is not loud or theatrical, but quiet and practiced, a muscle strengthened by repetition and humility. Craig often speaks of Lindsay Czarniak as the grounding force, who understands the peculiar duality of their shared profession, for she too has stood beneath unforgiving lights, parsing fast-moving narratives with precision and grace. And when he returns home after a day heavy with difficult reporting, it is Lindsay who reads the subtleties in his silence, who knows that sometimes what he needs is not advice, but acknowledgement, not solutions, but the simple assurance that vulnerability does not diminish strength. And in their kitchen, far from teleprompters and breaking news banners, they talk not as broadcasters, but as partners who have seen the world's best and worst, who recognize that longevity in both career and marriage depends on listening with the same attentiveness they offer their audiences. There was a particular evening, after a segment that revisited a national tragedy years later, when Craig found himself lingering in the studio longer than usual, staring at the empty anchor desk as if it might answer the unspoken question of how one continues to hold steady in a profession that demands both immediacy and empathy. And he realized then that resilience is not a solitary act, but a shared one, built through conversations that stretch late into the night, through laughter that interrupts heaviness, through the deliberate choice to step away from the relentless churn of headlines and walk outside into ordinary air. Those who have reached their 7th decade understand the sacredness of such ordinary air, the gift of mornings that arrive without fanfare, the solace found in routines that anchor rather than exhaust. And Craig, mindful of the passage of time, has grown more intentional about protecting those spaces, carving out moments with Lindsay that reaffirm life beyond the studio, whether it's a quiet dinner, a phone call to family, or simply sitting side by side in companionable silence, each honoring the other's unspoken battles. He has come to see that high-pressure moments do not define a life as much as the recovery that follows them, the way one chooses to metabolize stress into wisdom rather than cynicism. And this perspective has subtly reshaped his presence on screen, lending a deeper warmth to his interviews, a patience that signals to viewers, many of who have weathered their own storms, that endurance is not about never faltering, but about returning again and again to what steadies you. In conversations with colleagues, Craig sometimes reflects on how the industry has evolved, how technology has accelerated the news cycle into a near-constant stream, and how the temptation to remain perpetually plugged in can erode the very humanity that makes journalism meaningful. And it is here that Lindsay's counsel often echoes in his mind, reminding him that stepping back is not surrender, but strategy, that preserving one's inner equilibrium is an act of professional integrity as much as personal care. For those in their 60s who remember a slower pace of information, who recall evenings when the news arrived once and then gave way to family dinners and unhurried reflection, Craig's journey offers a quiet reassurance that even within today's relentless tempo, it is still possible to cultivate steadiness, to draw firm boundaries between public duty and private restoration, and to recognize that the cameras, however bright, do not illuminate the entirety of a person's strength. Resilience in the studio, he has learned, is forged not only in the heat of live broadcasts, but in the shadows afterwards, in the willingness to confront one's own emotional aftershocks and to seek connection rather than isolation. And as he continues to greet viewers each morning with measured calm, there is an added layer of depth born from these unseen reckonings, a silent promise that behind every composed introduction lies a man who has wrestled with the same uncertainties that accompany any long life, who understands that pressure will always exist but need not define us, and who, with Lindsay beside him, has chosen to navigate those fading camera moments with honesty, gratitude, and the enduring belief that resilience is less about standing alone under the lights and more about walking hand in hand into the quiet that follows.